Welcome everyone to the Umana Yana podcast. I'm your host, Josh Jaipal, and today we have a very interesting conversation that I can't wait to get into. It's really around community, the celebration of culture, how we show up for one another, and what we're hoping for as we look ahead to this, the evolution of this event and future events for our community. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my guest for today, who's going to introduce themselves, and then we're going to actually jump into our conversation. Take it away.
All right. Hi. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you supporting me and reaching out to me before the event. I'm Shabana Sharif. I am mom of two. I'm a New Yorker. I'm an aspiring author. I am currently writing my memoir, Pagli, and I'm also the creator of the Thrive Art exhibit that focuses on amplifying voices of the Indo-Caribbean diaspora, on artists and storytellers and writers.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for making the time to be here with us today. I think I'm going to receive a whole bunch from this conversation, and I think our audience is definitely going to receive a lot. So, one thing that really drew me to your work is I see how you don't limit yourself within borders. I really like the fact that, you got the New York stuff going on, and then there was intention for Toronto. And I love that energy when I see that. It's really about spreading the word, allowing that unity to extend beyond the borders, right? Because I think there's so much learning that happens in that for us as well. Whether we're US based or Canadian based, there's so much even culturally just from that perspective, that we might miss out on if we don't make these intentional opportunities to connect and, really collaborate in different ways. So I really thank you from the bottom of my heart because, had it not been for you, having this idea, I wouldn't have a pulse of what's going on in New York and how that influences what's going on in Toronto and vice versa. Right. So you really helped me to connect even more with kind of the movements on the ground, if you will, that are behind supporting our community. So I really thank you for the work that you do so tirelessly.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome. So I think that a thread that's really going to run through our conversation today is community. So I thought maybe that would be the starting point that would serve us best as well as our audience to discuss, community, when you hear that word, what it means to you, and how you really, continue to evolve that definition for you as you do your work and live your life and, spread that with the world.
hmm yeah, so I grew up in segregated Long Island. I was the only brown person in my school for a very long time. And on the weekends, I would go to the madrasa at the masjid where I would learn Islamic teaching and reading Arabic. And it was at the madrasa that I was totally embraced by community. There was no barriers. We all had similar backgrounds. We ate the same food. We talked story. It was just great to be in community, especially with young children like myself. And there were things that I did in Long Island that I felt very different about. Like I listened to hip hop and R&B. So
Hey.
that seems so normal growing up in Queens, but when you went to Long Island, it was like a taboo thing. Like girls didn't do that. So it was just nice to be in community and like be fully seen and not made fun of because what I looked like, what my name sound like. At the time, this is pre 9/11, I didn't really get teased for being a terrorist or anything like that. But, not so, that's not the same thing with kids who are growing up right now. You don't have to be Muslim, you just have to be brown or olive skin to be terrorized for your color and your name and your hair.
Hmm.
So for me, community is being connected, belonging, unity, and us all thriving together.
Yeah. I like that. And like I was actually having a conversation around community yesterday, and I found myself really trying to understand from the person I was talking with, what does it mean specifically to you? Because, for example, I find in the wellness space, if people refer to community, oftentimes they're made fun of and laughed out the room because, like, ha ha ha, you mean you're in a cult, right?
Right.
Like we'll do one of those things. Sometimes, community, we might mean, oh, people living in the same geographic region, right? Nothing other than that uniting them, but that's community. And so to me, I've gone to explore community and what it means to me over my life. And I think it's really through my 30s, my early 30s, where I got to really give myself time to pick it apart and not accept just everyone else's definition, really be like, Josh, what does it mean to you? And for me, I think it's very similar to what it is that you found that is at the root of how I define it, which is just that understanding that there is space for all of us, right? And that we are all welcome. And it's not that you have to leave certain hats of yours at the door to be accepted here. You can actually just wear all of your hats or none of your hats at all, and you're okay, you're safe here. So, how important has it been for you, given your early experiences in life, to hold this space and really, really bang on that drum of like community is important. It's such an important element for us and, receiving satisfaction from our lived experience.
Um, yeah, I think I really like what you said that you could wear your multiple hats and you don't have to leave them at the door. When I eventually did move to Queens, I noticed that like not necessarily like my closest connections were people that looked like me.
Mm,
So your community doesn't have to be the mirror image of you, right? My best friends were Puerto Rican, Black, and Dominican. And that kind of holds true to this day. Even though
yeah,
I'm doing this intentional Indo-Caribbean work, the people I do end up joking with and connecting with don't necessarily look like me, but we have this other like shared bond that it's beyond what we look like.
right.
Right. And so you could be in multiple communities, multiple groups. Like I'm a mom, I'm part of like the mom crew in my town. I'm also an activist and organizer. I'm a you could have your multiple identities and be in multiple communities. It's not a mirror image of you.
Yeah, I like how you said that. And, something that has been really live for me that I hadn't experienced anywhere else, now that we're in Costa Rica, there's a high concentration of these intentional communities and eco villages and things like that, right? And something that I find the temptation often is that when people join one of them, right, say they purchase a home in one of these communities, they then almost feel this deep sense of, I need to pledge allegiance to this community and only this community. Like it would be a betrayal to this
Right.
community for me to dabble with everybody else and just sort of free flow and engage with them. So, I'm really finding that there's a deep learning for as much as we might be tapped into this idea of community, there's levels to it, right? And we almost have to, when we're trying to embody it and cultivate it, we almost have to have this extra level of patience, almost expecting we'll have to have a one-on-one conversation with everybody because we're coming at it from such different perspectives. And a big thing out here that we've tried to do is really try to help people understand, like, okay, we don't need to have these divisions. We don't need to have these, like, we can have borderless communities, and you could still feel total pride in what you represent and where you purchased your home, whatever. But the bottom line is, we're still just repeating some of these old cycles of segregation and
Right.
division if we just keep doing that, right?
Right.
So, like, how does that come up for you in day-to-day conversations or even in the work that you do? Like, is that a conversation you find yourself having to have regularly?
I think storytelling, we go deep when you tell your story, you see your commonalities. I mean, in politics in America and across the world, right? Because a lot of places are going more right centered. Um, People are not focused on the commonalities. They're thinking about what separates us, what divides us. And the heart of storytelling is sharing your story and focusing on what brings us together and our commonalities. Um, so I think always like staying true to like who you are, sharing your story will connect you versus tear you apart. It
Mm,
doesn't matter, like we don't need to vote for all the same things or listen to the same music or style our hair the same way, right? But like when you share your story with someone and you tell them a slice about like, who you are, you connect. It's inevitable. It's really hard not to connect.
yeah, that's true. And something you shared about how, the majority of your friends had been and continue to be from certain backgrounds that aren't necessarily the ones that you have heritage within.
Right.
Something within that resonated with me because yesterday I was watching a show and I started to laugh, like actually laugh out loud. And the reason for that is because I noticed a very similar thing for myself. I'm like, wow, Josh, in your lifetime, you've had like four friends, four really close friends from this exact same part of the world who have actually, funnily enough, had the exact same name, right? But they're not. And so I'm like, okay, but that makes sense because we chose to focus on what unites us, what's similar about us versus
Right.
what's different, which we easily that choice was just as available, right?
Right.
But we chose to be like, huh, something about you. I want to get to know you a little bit. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, we connect on this and this and this and this. So,
Right.
I see the value in that, right? And when we give ourselves that chance, I know sometimes when it comes to inter-community connectedness and really strengthening those bonds, sometimes sometimes we're carrying a lot of hurts that might not even be ours. They might be passed down from the previous generations of like, you can't trust
Right.
so and so. You know, I still remember going to Charlie's West Indian store in Toronto, Shepherd and Morningside over there. And I went I went with an elder of mine, and I think it was summertime, so they had like the crabs and stuff, and you could get them. And he walked with me and he showed me the crabs, and I'm like, okay. And he's like, yeah, that's Guyanese people for you. I'm like, okay, okay, what do you mean? And he's like, that's what we are. We're just crabs in a bucket. If someone's trying to
Okay.
crawl out, we're gonna
Yeah.
drag them down, right? We're not gonna support them and help them get out. We're gonna drag them down. So I'm like, huh,
Right.
interesting. And
Right.
so I think I really just took that on as if it was my own personal lived experience, which it was not. And I started to
Okay.
really carry that energy into spaces where I found Guyanese people, right? It's like,
Interesting.
I should be hesitant over here. And nah, I probably don't want to work with those people, right? But then it's like, as I got older, I'm like, hang on, Josh, you're kind of rejecting yourself if
Hmm.
you're rejecting them. And you didn't even give them a fair chance to show how they're different, right? From every other experience that you might have had or other people might have had. So am I not just repeating the same harm that I'm wishing wasn't put on me?
Right. How old were you when that experience happened?
That was in my teens. I think I
Wow.
was I think I was a
So
junior
super
high era.
impressionable. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that phrase, crabs in a barrel, I think is the saying. Um, I guess I have a little bit of a different experience. So I lived in Long Island and then I came to Queens and I noticed the Queens Guyanese girls were very good. Like they weren't cutting school. They weren't they did all their homework.
Yeah,
And I was a little troublemaker. I wanted to have some fun, crack some jokes.
yeah.
And so I migrated to different groups, but I always checked in with like my Guyanese crew. I
Got
always
you.
wanted to still know like the pulse of like who's dating who and what's happening. And yeah, I think also coming from Long Island and then going to Queens, I was exposed to like not running home because like a lot of the girls couldn't hang out. They
Okay.
had to run home, they had to do chores, they had to babysit, they had to clean, they had to cook. And I was like I didn't want to be them, right? Like so I separated myself because I was like, oh, like
Yeah.
so we do sometimes do that for different reasons. You were kind of like unfortunately that happened to you at a young age. I self-selected it and did it for other reasons. So sometimes we do that. Like all our friends don't need to look like us and they shouldn't look like us, especially when you're coming from metropolitan areas, Toronto, New York, London. Like if all your friends still look like you, something is wrong. You were self-selecting
Mm,
and limiting your own like potential for growth, right? Like I meet so many people from New York who I'm the first Guyanese they've ever met. So they've met Guyanese people, they just
mhm.
don't know because they just see on the outside an Indian or a
Right.
black person, right? They never get to the point to even know their story,
It's very true.
and we're the backbone of the city. If you don't know a New Yorker who's Guyanese, you're not in community. You're not having conversations.
Hmm. No, I appreciate that, and I feel like that's so true. All the New York Guyanese energy that I've been able to connect with so far, in the last few years, like I see that, and it's like it's so true. It's like Toronto very much like the way it treats itself is like a cultural melting pot, where everyone is welcome, and you really get that. It almost like it all becomes kind of one, right? And I do see that, the Guyanese community in New York, like they have a very special place in the community, and like the role that it seems like we almost feel called to take on in community
Right.
building,
Right.
and returning for our people so no one feels left behind, and that other people who might not even look like us feel welcome as well. It's like we really connect with the experience of what all of that is really like. So we're not trying to repeat that. I find it's a very intentional thing that comes through from a lot of the New York energy I encounter.
Yeah, and the immigrant experience is so similar, right? Like Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Mexicans, like as immigrant people who are the people who build this city, and now we're gonna have a mayor of New York City who is also an immigrant.
Yeah.
Um, like if you're not connecting with the immigrant experience and the immigrant community, you're really missing out so much from the city.
Yeah, very true. So, you mentioned the Thrive art exhibit.
Yeah.
And, this is something that I've been seeing across my social media feed for some time. And I remember the first time I saw it, my reflex action was to actually hit share and send to everyone that I knew in Toronto. I remember that day. And, I also remember this deep sense of like, I really want to be there because I love what's being created here. So, I would love to hear from you because I feel like what you did here was like the epitome of holding space for community and really helping it to go to the next level. I really want to hear from you the inspiration, the intention, and how it really delivered for you, as the experience unfolded and then wrapped.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess I have to talk a little bit about how it came to be.
Sure.
So I come from an art, education, activism background, and I was doing work in the community. I paused and I focused on like raising my kids and, being a mom, doing all the things. And I recently got back into one of the orgs that I co-created, Jahaji. And while I was in community with folks, and it was like a big gap, right? It was like a seven year gap of doing this work. I just like was just like electrified with the
Mhm.
energy.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember coming up with the idea one day. I'm like, wouldn't this be cool? Like a space and focus really on the art. And so much of, our community work is about healing and trauma. And I really was like, we could focus on the art and that will come through the art, right? So my intention wasn't to create a healing or a trauma centered space, but inevitably it kind of like creates that because we are a people with ancestral trauma and generational trauma. So the art that's gonna come out, and it wasn't my intention at the time. I was just focused on like thriving and like doing all the great things,
Yeah.
having a chill space, having something like I would want to attend, right? And so the idea came to me. I mentioned it to a friend. I was like, "Oh, wouldn't that kind of be cool?" And then I realized I was that friend. Like I had to like just create the space. And so I had my first event in May, and I just like went through all the motions and just made it happen. I'm one of those people like if I have an idea, I do have tunnel vision and I
Gotcha.
will see it out through to the end, and I don't really focus on how much like certain things are going to cost me or time. I just want to like create something that I'm going to be proud of and people are going to want to like be a part of also. And so that's how it happened, right? So like getting visual artists, writers, spoken word artists. I knew like we have such a talented performing community with singers and dancers. So I wanted to have that. I didn't have live instruments on the first one, but we did at the second one for the Canada one because we do have so much art and like creativity in our community. And it doesn't have to be like at the rum shop or a chutney concert. Like it could be in different venues
Right.
and different mediums, different platforms, different audiences. And so, yeah, that's how that ended up happening. And the idea for Toronto just kind of naturally came on the road to that first event because
Gotcha.
knowing like we have the highest concentration of Indo-Caribbeans outside of the Caribbean in New York City, and the second largest concentration is in Toronto. It just kind of like naturally like was like, oh, so what's next? What that would be kind of cool, right? And it's always kind of like it starts off with like that'd be like that'd be an
Yeah, yeah,
interesting idea, and then just like make it happen,
for
right?
sure. Wow, I love that. And so like from imagining this to the first time you put it out, like what was that window of time? Was it really quick for you? Was it a bit of a slow burn? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, so I came up with the idea in February. I opened up the LLC like a couple of days later, and then the first event was May.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, if that doesn't show that you're serious about what you're doing, I mean, I don't know what does.
Right,
I
right.
love
I
that. Thank
appreciate
you.
that.
And like I'm over here in Costa Rica, so unfortunately I wasn't able to make the New York or Toronto event this time around. But I'm definitely marking this on my calendar when I see the future dates. I'm like, I want to fly out, make sure I'm part of this. But I would love to hear from you, to maybe ease a little bit of my FOMO. What were some of your favorite moments that took place during, let's say both events? We don't have to limit it to just Toronto, but what were some of the standout, favorites for you that you really take away?
Um, yeah, so I did talk a lot about New York in other interviews, but there was this like leading up to New York, there were two deaths in the community, one by suicide, one by drowning. And so that really set the tone for the event. People changed like the material that they were going to do. Some people did new material. And so it was like a really like somber like beginning, but very heavy. And then by the end, we were all like together in community going through this. And at the end, like we were dancing, like it was just
Wow.
like, so you could have like really heavy moments and still like find joy and happiness. And I think, in particular, like our community, right? Descendants of indentured, it's a very heavy history. A lot of it hasn't been unpacked or until like more recent generations of even like how indentureship impacts our lives today
Mhm.
and how can we like make it better.
Yeah.
Like how can we unpack it, make it better, and not continue cycles of violence or cycles of trauma. Or on the flip side, like our art, right? Like a focus on our art. Like how can we use our art to heal and soothe and be in community?
Right.
Because our people did have art, and that was something that probably kept a lot of people going.
Yeah, I hear that. And it's so interesting that, everything like the pieces, how the pieces changed, as the intention and just, real life unfolds, right? I think about, if I imagine having had, say, some of my cousins and my sisters and walking with them through these exhibits, I think to myself, like, okay, there's definitely going to be an admiration for the art, right? But I also feel like there would be this deep remembering of parts of themselves that they might not have experienced yet in this
Right.
lifetime. And so it would really stir up that curiosity because, what my lived experience within my families tends to be is that, I think I asked about indentureship in the group chat, the family group chat, right? And this is people from Canada, Florida, New York, whatever. I asked the question 'cause I'm like, I don't really know how far they're willing to go with this, right? And it was like
Mhm.
an almost just glossed over, like onto the next meme type thing, right? And it's like,
Oh
okay,
no.
I guess
Oh
I guess
no.
this is yet another thing we don't talk about, right? But at the
Um,
same time, I find that even if we don't talk about it, it's not just for the purposes necessarily of intentionally blocking it out. It's like sometimes they're not even aware. Like I almost assume that my elders would have this awareness of indentureship
right.
and all these other things that I don't have. And then I
Right.
would almost, I'll be honest, I think I'd probably judge them to be like, why are you guys so ignorant? Or like, why are you just forgetting that that's part of our history or whatever it happens to be? But then, as I started to understand, trauma and pain and lineage and all these different elements, more of it became a little clearer and I expanded my reasons why, if you will, right? So I just think that it was probably such a moment. And you tell me, I'd love to hear about this. If there were multiple generations of, say, the same family who came to this exhibit, because I'm so curious how they might have experienced the same piece in different ways. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, it was definitely a multi-generational space.
Yeah.
Probably leaning more to millennials, I would say. Um, but I think I overheard one of the artists say, like, I think I like this because of the intentionality of having different generations in the space, right?
Mhm.
Like, one generation can teach the other generation. It doesn't always have to be the older generation teaching the newer generation. It could be the newer generation, the younger generation teaching the older. And like you said about indentureship, a lot of it was I remember being around my mom and my aunts and they didn't know, right? And so like when I was on my quest in my 20s to learn everything I could learn, and that's an ongoing quest for like the last 20 years, right? Like sharing it with them there was so much like learning back and forth.
Mm.
And I remember I interviewed one of my aunts for my book secretly. But
Okay.
anyway, I was interviewing her. She didn't know. Um, and like I didn't make that connection with indentureship because sometimes you think it's so long ago.
Mhm.
But literally my Aja, which is my paternal grandfather, he was born the year after indentureship ended.
Okay.
So we think like it sounds like it's so long ago,
Mhm.
but it's really not that long ago.
Yeah,
You know what
absolutely.
I mean? Um, and so to think that his father was an indentured person, worked the fields, and after indentureship was over, he continued working the fields, and my grandfather never went to school, and he worked the fields.
Right. Mm.
It's not that far away,
Yeah, that's
right?
so
When you
true.
think about it, like it's either your grandfather or a great grandfather and your grandmother, right? Like the women were working the fields, right? The only country where women didn't work the fields in the indentured diaspora, I think, was Mauritius.
Mm.
Lovely country, I recommend. Um, but it's not that far away, but we don't know.
Yeah.
And you're right, the older generation doesn't necessarily know. Um, but that's the unique thing about having so much access to information, right? We could be on the internet and looking up like things that are not, like making us fuller or better, or we could actually like look up things that, you know, gives us a fuller understanding of ourself, our people, our family.
Mhm.
And so I was really grateful for this event where I was able to honor two people in the arts. I honored Heidi McKenzie, who is a ceramic installation artist, and she does a lot of her work on indentureship, focusing on the women of indentureship. And she was moved by Gayatri Bahadur, who wrote Kali Woman.
Mhm.
And I think, that's one of those books that everybody should read, men, women. Obviously, like, it should probably be like, what is like, you go to college, like, make sure you read this book before you go to college,
I
like one
hear
of those.
that. Yeah.
And then we had Nikki Shafula. She is a playwright in Toronto. She's written plays. She also has a short that she's currently touring throughout Canada. So we honored both women, one on Friday, one on Saturday. And there was also an actress, Michelle Muhammad, who did a scene from one of Nikki's plays.
Wow.
So it was
Okay.
like it was, like I try to like work with the artist to really like create this seamless flow. We opened day two, which is Saturday, the performances and the storytellers. We opened with a trio that was magnificent. One person was on Dantal, Khadija, one person was on Dolak, Darsh, and then our singer, Rishma Otto, she did harmonium and singing, no background music. They rocked it. They
Yeah.
did three sets of medleys, and it was amazing. They like set it up on the floor. Everybody was mic'd. Um, but we like planned it, right? Like everything was like done and it was just done well. And you don't necessarily like, I'm Muslim, we don't have singing in the masjid. Like we have some qasida singing, which is like devotional music that happens in Guyana. It really hasn't been passed to the new generation in New York, unfortunately. Where it's sad, like when you lose music, when you lose certain parts of your faith, or ways to like honor your faith, it is sad, right?
Yeah. Totally.
So yeah, for me, like I don't need to, I don't maybe want to like go to a mandir, but I still want to be in community and hear like Indian instruments and Indian singing. And yeah, I
Yeah.
was also part of the Rajkumari Center, and I was on, I was volunteer with them, and they had these kitchery events.
Mhm.
So a kitchery is like a dish that's like, well, like with dal, rice mixed up. And so the kitchery was like basically like Guyana, right? Like all these things and like
Yeah.
what the arts. And the Rajkumari Center was named after a playwright, poet, activist, like all the things, right?
Mhm.
Writer. Um, And yeah, so I think my interest with the arts probably happened way before I was interested in like doing the work. It was always there. And I was also a little jealous of like not having certain things accessible to me when I was young. So I wasn't allowed to like go and like learn to sing or learn to dance because sometimes those things when you grow up in a more like Muslim household, it's like, oh, those are Hindu things.
Gotcha.
So it was nice to bring in like this be in this space where it's secular, but we could bring all our identities, faith or non-faith based,
Yeah.
and we're also not a monolith, right? So you can be like Indian, you could be mixed race, you know. And for the first Thrive event, I had two people who were not even Guyanese.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Well,
I mean, like if if you want to be a part of something, it feels weird to be like, no, you can't be a part. You know what I mean?
of
Like,
course, yeah.
um, and when I say Guyanese, I should have said Indo-Caribbean. They were not Indo-Caribbean. But they still wanted to be a part of it. And that made me feel great, right? Like, so yeah, you don't have to be Indo-Caribbean to be part of it. The point to create it was to amplify the Indo-Caribbean experience, the storytellers, and the artists.
Wonderful. Well, from outside looking in, it looks like you absolutely crushed it, and I know no person's an island. So, the team and the support that was behind you to really help make this all happen. Kudos to all of you because it looked absolutely fantastic, from the outside looking in. And, I would love to hear from you, some of the standout feedback that you've received so far from the event. This could also be, Toronto and New York or just Toronto, whatever you prefer to share on. I'd love to hear that because I think it's so important when we have that communication loop, with the people that we're in service to understand, all right, this was the message. Did you receive it? Was I the right messenger for it? And how do we improve upon this, to maximize our efficiency and impact moving forward?
Right. I think feedback forms should not be read until 2 to 3 weeks after your high goes down.
All right.
Um, but according to the, in-person communication feedback, it was great. I heard a few people say this is just the beginning, and it was just like multiple people saying it. And, being non-Canadian, I'm, a New Yorker living in Jersey, just to hear the welcoming spirit of like, I was a little hesitant, like, how are these people gonna like, my vibe is different, my voice is different, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm an amateur comic, like, are they gonna be ready for all this? Like, but that was great. And positive feedback really does keep it going. You want to get like other people's insight. And usually people who do give feedback, they're the people who really, really love you or really want to like tear the event or you apart. And that's the unfortunate thing about feedback, right? You don't get like if say like 100 to 120 people came out on the three, you're not getting 100 people who respond. You're getting, like maybe 10 at max,
Right.
and you're gonna get those two polar opposites. I want to say it definitely leaned more on positive. Um, and sometimes the hate does fuel you.
Yeah. Right.
It makes you like, it pushes you because it's like, oh, that's what you think? Like, let me show you what else I could do.
Yeah.
Thrive is not a team of 15 to 20 paid staff. It is me. Like, obviously the artists, their work is is focused on, right? Like all the marketing and promotion go is really amplifying their work, right? That's what I do. That's how I create the space.
Right.
They also get a stipend. Pretty much everybody gets a stipend who's part of Thrive. And, it's not something that I needed to do, but I wanted to do to let folks know, like, for your time, if you come to the event, if you're present, like, I'm going to give you a stipend.
Hmm.
Um, it's not a profit, obvious, like a profit making. It's really out of love of
Right.
community. Um, I don't have any like wealthy donors or sponsors or organizations who are currently supporting Thrive. I would love that. And so anybody who is wants to support this work and wants it maybe like annually, um, yeah, it's really important to like support the community and support work like this. I'm a single mom. I'm from Queens. I'm an aspiring author. I do not have a trust fund. So anything that, you all like give to thrive to these events, it really goes back, right? The venue costs money. We did it in downtown Toronto. So, it's a downtown Toronto price tag,
Hmm.
audio, printing, like all the things. And that's excluding like all the expenses for me to like fly down. Like all of that is like my personal, it's not really personal expenses, but it's like I took it on as personal expenses. So yeah, it's a lot financially to do. It's not sustainable at the rate that it is right now. Maybe it could be something biannually, but I would love for it to be annual in both New York and Toronto.
Yeah. And I mean, you know what, to be honest with you, I saw the impact. I get windows into a lot of different events and people who put these events on, and I get to meet them and get to know them very deeply. And there was something, extra special about this event, I feel. You could really feel how heart-driven this was and how purpose-driven it was. For me, and this could just be because I also wear the entrepreneurial hat. So I know the behind the scenes non-glamorous things that have to happen for the glamorous moment to happen. Let's
Right,
call it what it is. It's a moment of a lot of like not so glamorous things that we take care of. And
right.
so, sometimes I've found that the feedback that has seemed most out of touch with what I was trying to do comes from a place of straight up ignorance. And
Mm.
that ignorance being those people who never had to plan an event, even the smallest of events, to understand how many people you need to call, how much you need to look at that budget, how much you need to just figure it out, right? Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And I think that sometimes we become overly accommodating hosts of things that we almost prevent the people who are experiencing things or coming to the main thing from understanding what went into it because we don't want them to feel that burden or guilt or whatever we
Right,
want to call it. But I think straight up that sometimes we need to put it in people's faces about what goes into these types of events because otherwise they're never going to hear about it and they're going to keep having made that choice to remain ignorant and
right,
perhaps not offer feedback that's necessarily constructive, but more just reckless, if you will.
right.
So I would love to hear from you about the logistics that actually happened, all the magic you had to pull off in order for these things to actually come to life and be executed. Because I think that that will go a long way in you receiving support moving forward for this, and for you to also receive a lot more compassion and perhaps gratitude
Mm.
for all that goes into this.
Right. I mean, hypercritical feedback um, can make you shut something down. And I don't think people realize like there is someone who's going to read it and you know who that person is.
Yeah.
Like I'm the person, like um on that note, even the things that you don't do, but you've done everything to prevent, something else happens, things happen, right? Like one of the vendors didn't take like wasn't taking like electronic payments. That looks bad on me. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Like I'm learning with the rest of the people and then it becomes like someone was late and that then I'm hearing it was disorganized. One person was late. Like
Yeah.
one person out of like 3 days events, and then I'm hearing like it was disorganized. That hurts.
Mhm.
Because I did so much to like make it organized as possible. And then there are moments where like you're human, right? Like I was literally like hauling speakers on Thursday in the snowstorm. I don't know if you know, like it was a snowstorm that day, and I'm at the printer for like multiple hours waiting for things to get printed because I want to have like some things at the day of, and I'm painting on the Friday. Like
Yeah.
literally, like, there is still paint on my sneakers, like that I like. Um, and I remember like just telling the people that were coming in, like I told a couple of artists, like I have to leave and get ready. Whoever comes, just like greet them, but I really need to like sometimes you have to also like not be so self-serving. You have to take care of yourself. And if for me, like a shower and a change of dress, like if I need to do that, like I'm gonna do that. I'm sorry if I, like if I'm, like these things, like I'm gonna take care of me, right? Like I'm a mom. There's so much taking care of other two young people that I love to the, the bottom of the ocean and to the highest of the moon. But I always make time for myself to take care of me because if I'm not well and I'm a little sick because they were sick for 2 weeks, um,
Yeah.
I can't take care of them, right? If I'm not well, I can't execute this event.
Right.
You know, if I don't feel good, if I feel like, my spirit is down, it's going to come throughout in the event. It's you all are going to feel it, right? So I have to take care of me. Um, but yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. And doing an event is very exhausting physically, right? So there's so much work that you have to do to get to that place, like the visuals, the promotion, the audio, finding the venue, finding the artist, a submission call, going through their artwork, reading all their material, helping them, like, how are you going to sell? What are you going to sell? Like all the coaxing that you have to do.
Yep.
You have some people who are very extroverted, some people who are very introverted. They're not going to promote their material. So it's also like, oh, that's interesting. This is another challenge, right? Like, so I have to do promotion for your work,
Right.
and there's not going to be that reciprocal relationship, and I have to figure it out, right? The all the graphic design, event planning, community building, marketing. I tried to communicate with all the artists one on one, either video or phone. Some people I missed, but like you do as much as you possibly can. I did have about like 20 artists that I was working with, and I didn't want that. I actually
Yeah.
had that amount in New York, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna only do 15 in Canada. And just like sometimes it just happens, right? People see what you're doing and there's like FOMO and they want to jump in. Or sometimes like for me, like I wanted to like honor someone and that wasn't really like initially what I was planning to do, but I thought it was just like it made sense, right? Like it's my second event. Like I was stepping it up from 1 day to 3 days. How
Right.
else can I step that up? I had a screening. I screened 3 short films. We had a Q&A for one of the films. We did 2 honorings with a physical award. Um,
Wow.
like, try to like, how do I step up like my first to my next? Um, because I had the 3 days, like I also had to figure out how am I going to put so much content. So we had like a vendors pop up, which
Mhm.
was local people in the GTA who sold their goods, right? And like all that is like me promoting them and hopefully vice versa, right? So yeah, the community building starts with the artists, the vendors, the community as a whole. A lot of people did say they heard it from word of mouth, but that word of mouth was Instagram, right? And that's like being on Instagram every day and pushing it out and sending it with people and tagging people. And that's how I did most of my communication and promotion.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I mean, I think you really helped to highlight some of what goes into these events, right? And here's the thing, everyone, you still found a way to respond to someone like me who has nothing to do with the event happening or in planning, right? In a timely fashion, right? You still managed to do all of that on top of curate this wonderful experience that actually to me is sounding like 3 or 4 separate experiences roped into one. And I think that that's often a missed thing that people don't connect with if they're not behind the scenes or in the trenches with you, right? They're not understanding that, oh my goodness, just because I had a successful event, that last one, now because of the competitive landscape we live in, I will live under this pressure of how do I one up that and ultimately one up myself, but
Right.
also make sure that I can keep one upping myself to hopefully get your attention. Right?
Right.
People don't understand that. And something that's brought a lot of clarity to my life, whether from a financial perspective or perhaps a compassion perspective, is actually looking at the numbers and confronting them, not just imagining them airy-fairy, actually getting together and writing them down with pen and paper. So, I don't know if you can maybe rough math this for me, right? If we just look at the Toronto event, right? The Toronto event from, say, doors open to doors closed on those 3 days. How many hours was that event?
Well, I started setting up on the Thursday, but yeah. So The thing is, like, the doors open for me 11 o'clock on Friday,
Okay.
whereas everybody else, the doors opened at 6 o'clock, right? So
Yeah, I'm
my,
talking about everybody else. Let's just talk about
yeah.
everybody else for once.
So, yeah. So from 6 o'clock Friday to Sunday, 2 o'clock.
Okay. So if we just estimate like, just when, going to bed, coming to the event, that kind of thing, right? So
Right.
if we just look at the Thrive Art exhibit was
Three,
how many hours?
3 plus 5, so 8, and then another, say 12 to be on the safe side.
12? Okay. Now if we look at 12, right? Now, how many hours would you estimate went into? And I mean, I'm going from vision, right? Or idea, forget even vision, idea to you've packed up everything and you're back in your house. How many hours of planning and all the things do you think actually went on?
Yes, I started in the summer, so it's hundreds of hours,
Right.
like, yeah.
Yeah. So I think everyone connecting with that math will actually go a very long way as well, perhaps in the efforts to not just maybe offer that constructive feedback, but perhaps offer some hands to help make the next one that much better, right? Because you're one person, right? And I don't know one person right now who could solidly dedicate hundreds of hours to the creation of one thing, right? Like think about even our workday, right? Many people get paid a salary to do one thing very well, right? Do they get to do just that one thing? No. They're going to have like 20 things that they need to do while they're trying to do that and do a good job, right? So to me, the fact that the doors even opened on Friday is success, right?
Mm.
The fact that you executed 3 days and you took time, when you are almost in it, it almost seems in a bit of a way like you got the opposite in from certain folks, right? Certain energies and whatnot. Of instead of receiving flowers, it's like flowers, it was almost justified why you don't deserve flowers. Yet at the same time, you're going and handing awards to people recognizing the wonderful contributions that they've made to the community and the culture. So
Mm.
I just want to give you your flowers in this moment because there's it's a fraction. What people get to experience is a fraction of the time, energy, resources that go into any of these kind of events coming to life, right? And so many of the people behind it, like straight up, they don't pocket a dollar. Chances are when they've done their budget, they've actually gone from the perspective not of how much am I going to make here, but how much am I willing to give away and not expect to come back to me.
Right.
And I think unless you're actually doing one of these things, you don't know that. You don't have that feeling, right? You
Right.
really, and so it really feels unfair to then come at somebody, and say, oh, it's ultimately throwing the baby out with the bathwater thing, right? Like, okay, one person was late. Do you know how many other people were involved here who were on time or early, right?
Right.
Just to use that example, right? And
Right.
it's just like, come on, guys. Like, are we
Right.
really contributing to the ongoing development and cultivation of community, or are we just being those cautionary tales that we were warned about from previous generations of why
Right.
it just won't work for us all to come
Right.
together and be one?
Right. Even with the stipend, I gave what I could, right? I'm not gonna say the amount, but people got different amounts.
Yeah.
But I remember when I was talking to the people who run the gallery, they were like, "Why are you giving stipends?
Mm.
Like, you're giving them a platform. You did all the promotion because they saw my Instagram. They were like, you did way too much work to then also give them a stipend." And it's like something I didn't think about for New York because I was just like, it was my first event. I felt like I had to kind of do this because so much of our work goes unpaid,
Right.
especially as I think as women, and most of the artists in both were women. Um, and so I wanted to be really intentional about that. But when it came to like that, it's not like a relationship where both parties are getting something out of. And so, going forward, it would be like it would just make practical sense not to have a stipend, even though
Yeah.
it's something I want to give. It doesn't make sense
Right.
unless this is your full-time work and you know what I mean? Like the only way to get, this type of artist is to pay them. But yeah, so it's like sometimes you have to do things that you don't want to do, right?
Hmm. Definitely. Yeah, and I see that. And I think that for me at least, when I've thought back to, say, events and retreats and offerings and stuff like that, where I'm definitely not charging the value, right? Price and value are two very different things, right? But I'm
Right.
definitely not charging anywhere close to the full value, right?
Right.
I find that sometimes what happens is it gets passed over, right? Because you've just packed in, like for example with Thrive, right? You packed in this like wonderful, immersive, all angles holistic experience, right? And people are so used to just maybe experiencing one part of that, right?
Right.
So it's almost like when you make this value pack offering, it's almost diminished in a way. And it's like, okay,
Right.
guys, like you're pushing me against a wall that I don't want to go against. But you're basically asking me to tell you my numbers so you can see why this is worth you making this financial exchange and investment right now, right? So
Mhm.
it's like you almost want me to go line by line and say, okay, this men's retreat, yeah, it's only $300, but let me tell you, this cacao ceremony is $50. Me going and getting this trainer for us, that cost me $100 an hour. Me getting all the
Mm,
food and all the things that I need to do
right.
for you guys, all of these kinds
You
of things.
know, you know what? It's interesting because I read a forum yesterday, and I was telling myself I'm not gonna read any more forums until I chatted with you, and it was disheartening what the person said about money stuff.
Mm,
So I had to pay $1,500 Canadian for the venue for the 3 days. The ticket sales alone doesn't cover all the stuff that goes in, right? So I'm also an American, right? So I didn't necessarily know like what would be too much, right? Like I asked, some artists and no one was like saying, "Oh, this is way too much." But um sometimes you don't get the feedback towards the end, right? And so you don't know if you're charging too much. And I remember like someone's feedback was about like, well, if you're charging this, then this should be this and this should be this. And it's like at the end of the day, the event was in Toronto.
yeah.
Like I don't
Hmm.
think people like even equate that like where you have the event matters, right?
Yeah.
Um And it like you said, like if someone never planned an event, they're not even thinking like this is not a free venue.
Hmm.
We're in a proper gallery in downtown,
Yeah.
Toronto.
And I can only imagine what the cost was because I know back when I was just walking the streets of Toronto, just doing some shopping downtown, for example, the smallest, tiniest, seemingly like establishment that I could have easily missed, right? I talk with owners, this and that, and I understand that they're paying over like $20,000 a month in rent, right? And I'm like, guys, to keep the doors open, I'm like, in my mind, my math doing brain, I'm like, there's absolutely zero way you guys are even breaking even on a month to
Right.
month basis. So many businesses, let alone independents like yourself who are like out here trying to extend the reach and impact in the community, like to carry these costs, right? And oftentimes it's like, I'm not sure if you connect with this idea, but like for me, I know that when I've sort of set out with an event and I kind of just lead with it from a numbers perspective, like I got to sell 8 tickets, before this is even at the break even point, the energy is just off. And then it usually just totally doesn't formulate in the way that I
Mm.
intended. Right. But sometimes we just do all these things because we have a deep calling within us. And it's like, I don't know if I'm going to receive anything, but the bottom line is that I'm doing this because I know that I have something to give, right?
Right.
So, I think that the clarity of a few of these behind the scenes things, even if we equate, okay, from a 9 to 5 that pays you, right? What's hundreds of hours of your time worth in that setting versus where you kind of gave it away, you
Right.
invested it, but it can be viewed as giving away because there's no direct compensation in that moment,
Right.
right? And so we have to I think we have to do a better job of, you know, not only commending people like yourself who do these types of events, but also being less ignorant, right? Like,
Mm.
we're gonna chat GPT, what does having, purple bubble gum on the bottom of my left shoe mean on a Thursday of May? Like, we're gonna all this nonsense, right? But it's like, hang on, why don't we actually try to understand the plight of the entrepreneur? Why don't we try to understand what sort of hurdles continue to exist within our community coming together so we can overcome some of those things? Because a lot of these things we're staying stuck in a loop, but we're saying we want something different and we're not doing anything to help it.
Right. Yeah. And the thing about it, it's hard not to be in that scarcity mindset because you do have limited resources and funds.
Hmm.
And so I know even when I did the first event, I was like, oh my God, I'm not even going to break even. Oh my God, so much is going to come out of my pocket. Like I'm a single mom of two. Like like I have groceries over here, no lie, are $1,000 for just a family of three.
I believe
Like
it.
US dollars, right?
Mhm.
Um, Rent is, extremely high. Um, and so I remember just having like this, oh my God, like this is going to impact me personally if I don't break even.
Mhm.
And I started like pushing like promotion and like, with like a little percentage off and like, like these like things. I sold out a week before the event and I didn't have tickets to sell at full price because of all those little deduction things that I did.
Right.
And I was just like, sometimes you don't even know, like, you don't know, like until you sell that first ticket. And the person who always buys that first ticket, you never forget them because you're like, oh, someone believes in me,
Yeah, no doubt.
Um, and the artist, but like at that point, like it's because it's you, you feel like it's you, it becomes wrapped up in like worth, right? And it's a horrible thing, right? Um, so yeah, so like I think also just knowing like this time around, I'm not reducing anything.
Good on
Who shows up shows up. I kind of want to know, like, Toronto, really, like, where are you? Like GTA, like like are you interested? And they were. Like
you.
the price was a little high. I know that now. I know how
Right.
to like adjust moving forward. But I also know like there's a demand.
Absolutely. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's the thing, right? Like you came in and it's not like you know it all. You're here to learn, but you're also here to offer something to the community, right? So, I in my mind, whenever I've done something, especially in a new spot that I haven't necessarily been familiar with, some of the best things that you can receive is the feedback, right? And a willing hand to perhaps support, when it comes to the next time. And I think that leads nicely into our next question, which is about how can people really contribute to the future Thrive events. But before you respond to that question, right? An exercise that I do with a lot of my clients, and with myself, is I ask them this question, right? I'm like, okay, look, say you had a magic genie in front of you, right? And you can get all three wishes that you asked for granted, but you need to tell me them in the next 10 seconds, right? So I want to ask you that question. And I ask you that because I have seen that we as people get everything that we do or don't ask for. Okay. And the example I want to share with you about that is, a couple months ago, I woke up one morning and I'm like, okay, today would be a really great day to have some income come in. So, that's as far as I got specific wise. So I had a client who happens to call me up that day. Hey, are you available to do a session today? Wonderful. Okay. Now we had that session, all that kind of stuff, right? Then I think to myself, okay, Josh, you can't complain because you got exactly what you asked for. You wanted to make some money today, right? Now, then I thought back to the days when I never asked for anything, but I wanted something. I was like, well, I kind of got that too. I can't be mad that the universe didn't return to me something I didn't ask for, right? So I started to connect with this idea that I need to be irritatingly specific about what I ask for because that's the only way that I'm going to get it. So I
Right.
want to turn it over to you, and we take more than our 10 seconds, right? But if you were to be irritatingly specific about
Hmm.
what you want and what you need moving forward from the community, maybe other businesses, other entrepreneurs, artists, what message do you have for them about what you need from them? What you're trying to call in so that this event can continue to build its momentum and continue to have impact for years to come.